All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're going to try to simplify a topic that can be a little bit complex, even for seasoned Enki users.
Yeah.
It's the FSRS algorithm
Oh, yeah.
used in Anki. Have you heard of FSRS?
Of course.
Okay, cool. Just making sure we're all on the same page. So for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar, Anki is a flashcard app,
Right.
and it uses spaced repetition,
Right, to help you remember things.
long term. And FSRS, it's an algorithm that's designed to make that spaced repetition even more effective.
Yeah, it's like fine-tuning the engine of your learning.
Exactly.
So to really understand how it works, we've got two main sources we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
A Reddit post and a PDF document, both from the creator of FSRS.
Oh, awesome. Straight from the source.
Straight from the source.
Oh, yeah.
He explains, the mechanics of the algorithm, answers some common questions. So what's really interesting about FSRS is, while it focuses primarily on long-term memory, it also takes into account the impact of those short-term reviews that you do, shortly after learning something new.
Okay, and is that like a new idea?
Well, that's where things get a little bit controversial, I guess you could say. There's been a lot of debate about whether those short-term reviews actually help or hurt your long-term retention.
Yeah, you would think the more review is good.
Right.
Okay.
Like, the more you see it, the better you should remember it, right?
Yeah.
But the creator of FSRS, he's done some research, and it actually suggests that those rapid-fire reviews, they might not be as beneficial as we once thought. They could even be making things harder. In fact, he's got some graphs, some really interesting visuals that illustrate this point.
Okay, so how does he show that? Like, what's the...
Yeah, so, imagine you're reviewing a flashcard, and you see the question, and you think, oh, I don't remember this, and you hit again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what his research shows is that answering again during those early reviews, it can actually decrease memory stability down the line.
So you think you're, reinforcing it?
You think you're
yeah.
reinforcing it,
All
but
right.
you're actually making it,
Hurting it.
yeah, less stable in the long run. Almost like your brain gets a little too comfortable with that quick recall, and it doesn't have to work as hard to really lay down those neural pathways for the long haul.
So it's almost like it thinks, I don't really need to remember this long term because I'm going to see it again soon anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I can just, kind of keep it in my short-term memory for now.
Interesting.
And that's where the concept of forgetting curves comes in.
Okay.
The creator of FSRS has developed these visual representations, they're like graphs, that show how quickly we forget information, and it's based on different review histories.
So different forgetting curves depending on how you've been reviewing it.
Exactly. And they really show that the timing of those reviews can make a huge difference.
So it's not just about brute force review. It's about timing it correctly.
It's all about timing.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
strategically spacing those reviews to really optimize learning.
like little stepping stones to mastery.
Exactly. So this brings us to another really interesting aspect of FSRS. It's how it interacts with learning steps.
Learning steps.
Those are those graduated intervals that Anki uses to introduce new cards.
Yeah, the traditional way of easing into it.
Right, like gradually introducing those new facts into your long-term memory.
Gotcha.
But here's where it gets a little tricky.
Uh-oh.
FSRS allows users to leave those learning steps blank.
Okay.
And when they do that, FSRS kind of takes over. And it can sometimes create some really short intervals between reviews, way shorter than you might expect if you were using those learning steps.
So why would it do that? It sounds like the opposite of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of a head-scratcher, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't actually the creator's original intention for people to use it this way.
Okay.
So he was actually responding to a situation where users were already leaving the learning steps blank.
Oh, so it's like a workaround.
Yeah, it's like a solution to a problem that was already happening.
Okay.
And he wanted to make sure that the algorithm could still function effectively, even in those situations.
So it's okay, you're going to do this anyway, so I'm going to make it work as best as I can.
Exactly. But it does raise a really interesting question, if those short intervals aren't ideal for long-term retention, then why is FSRS allowing them?
Right, that's what I'm wondering.
So according to the creator, it comes down to a balance. It's about balancing those desired retention levels with something called card stability.
What's card stability?
Like how likely it is that you're going to remember that card correctly in the future. So he's basically saying that even without those predefined learning steps, FSRS can still figure out the optimal review schedule to get you to that level of mastery that you want.
So it's like it's confident in its abilities even without those learning steps.
Yeah, it's like, trust me, I got this.
Okay.
But I can see how those short intervals could be a little jarring.
Yeah.
Like for users who are used to, more of a gradual approach.
Like easing into it.
Yeah. So to bridge that gap, there's a tool called FSRS Helper.
FSRS helper. Okay.
And it's designed to kind of help users make sense of all this.
Oh, okay.
So what it does is it analyzes your Anki stats, and then it recommends learning steps that might be a little bit better aligned with, your personal learning patterns.
Okay, so it's like a translator almost.
Yeah, like a bridge between FSRS and the way most people are used to using Anki.
Okay.
But there's a catch.
Oh, there's always a catch.
Right.
What's the catch with FSRS help?
Well, FSRS Helper and FSRS, they don't always see eye to eye because FSRS Helper, while it's very helpful, it doesn't have the same level of sophistication when it comes to modeling short-term memory.
Oh, so it doesn't quite understand
It doesn't have that same depth of understanding.
that short-term stuff.
Right. FSRS itself, it's constantly evolving, refining its approach. It's incorporating the latest research on how our brains work.
Keeping up with the times.
Exactly. FSRS Helper, it's working with a more static model.
So it can't quite keep up.
It can't quite keep up with all the nuances.
So even with the best of intentions, it can't perfectly replicate what FSRS is doing.
Right.
It's almost like trying to explain a complex scientific concept to someone who's never studied science.
Yeah. You can get the general idea, but you're going to miss some of the finer points.
Right, the nuances.
The nuances. And the creator of FSRS, he acknowledges this. He knows that modeling short-term memory accurately is still a really active area of research.
Because our brains are so complex.
They're so complex. We're just scratching the surface. We're just starting to understand how our brains handle all this information in the short term and the long term.
Yeah, like how it all interacts.
Right. It's like we're explorers,
Yeah.
charting unknown territory in the world of learning and memory.
And FSRS is like our map.
Our map, our compass, our guide.
But even with the best map, we still need to know how to navigate, right?
Exactly. You can't just rely on the map blindly.
You got to know where you're going.
You got to make choices about your path, adjust your approach as needed.
Okay, so it's like a partnership
It's a partnership.
between the map and the explorer.
The explore between the
Nice.
algorithm and the learner.
I like that.
And it's not just about, mastering FSRS or Anki. It's about understanding yourself as a learner. Like, what works for you? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How can you use these tools to really optimize your learning?
Yeah, and it's fascinating how FSRS is kind of shining a light on these questions,
It's making us think differently about how we learn.
challenging those assumptions.
Yes, absolutely. We thought we knew what worked, but maybe we don't.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to keep digging into in the next part of this deep dive.
We're going to talk about, the implications of all this research. What does it mean for how we use Anki? How can we apply these insights to become more effective learners?
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into FSRS and all this cool Anki stuff.
Yeah, before we jump back into all the technical stuff like short-term memory and FSRS helper,
Right.
I kind of want to circle back to those forgetting curves
Oh, yeah.
that the FSRS creator developed.
Mm-hmm.
They're just such a powerful visual,
They are.
how our memory works or doesn't work.
Sometimes doesn't work, yeah.
Right,
It
exactly.
really highlights how, when you review stuff,
Yeah,
makes a big difference
huge impact, yeah.
for how long you remember it.
And it makes you wonder, are we I don't know,
Yeah.
too focused on those short-term games?
Like that quick recall.
Yeah. And are we sacrificing long-term mastery?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's
Yeah.
are we shooting ourselves in the foot
Yeah,
by trying to remember things too quickly?
exactly.
And I think the research on FSRS kind of brings that question to the forefront. It's
Yeah.
maybe we're not as good at judging this as we thought we were.
Our intuition isn't always right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it really makes you think about, how we use Anki
Yeah.
and all these other learning tools.
Yeah.
Are we being too reliant on just, our gut feeling?
Oh, interesting.
Assuming that more reviews is always better,
Yeah,
you know?
it's always better, yeah.
But maybe it's not.
Right.
Maybe we need to, pay more attention to the data,
Oh, I see.
to what the algorithms are telling us.
Yeah, because they can see things that we can't.
They can see the bigger picture. They
Yeah.
have all that data.
Okay, so It's like we're at this, it's like a crossroads.
Crossroads.
Yeah.
We've got, like, the old way of doing things.
Intuition.
Yeah.
Intuition, yeah.
Tried and true, maybe.
Right.
But then we've got these new fancy algorithms.
Like FSRS.
Like FSRS that are like, hey, wait a minute.
There's a better way.
Yeah.
Let me show you.
Okay, so how do we, like...
So how do we balance those two things?
Right. How do we find that sweet spot?
I think that's the key.
Yeah.
It's not about, like, just throwing out our intuition.
Right.
But it's also not about ignoring the data.
Okay.
It's about finding a way to bring those two things together.
So it's a collaboration.
It's a collaboration.
Between human and...
And machine algorithm.
Right.
And, you know, that brings us back to those learning steps.
Oh, yeah, learning steps, right?
Because remember, FSRS, you can just leave those blank.
Yeah.
And it'll do its thing.
Sometimes with those really short intervals.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little crazy with those short intervals.
Yeah. And that wasn't really the intention.
Yeah.
But, you know, people were doing it anyway.
Right, right.
So he had to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
But it does kind of highlight, you know, this tension between what users want and what the algorithm thinks is best.
Right. Because some people, they might just...
They might hate those short intervals.
Yeah, like, why am I seeing this again?
Yeah, it's too much, too soon.
Thanks. Yeah.
Even if it's, like, technically better for long-term retention,
right.
You know, it might not feel good.
It might not work for everyone.
It might not work for everyone, exactly.
Yeah, so it's a good reminder that learning is, like, personal.
It's personal.
Yeah.
It's not one size fits all.
Right.
And algorithms, they're powerful.
Yeah.
But they can't, like, fully capture all those individual differences.
Like how I like to learn versus how you like to learn.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like what motivates you? What makes you tick?
Like how you respond emotionally to things.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
So I think it's important to remember that FSRS, like any tool,
it has its limitations.
It's not magic.
It's not going to, like, instantly make you a genius.
Right. You still got to put in the work.
You got to put in the work.
Yeah.
It's more like, you know,
a guide,
a compass.
Okay.
It can point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
But you're still the one who has to walk the path.
We got to make those choices.
You got to make the choices.
Okay.
Adjust your course as you go.
Yeah. So it's not just about mastering the algorithm. It's about, like,
mastering yourself as a learner.
Understanding how you learn best.
Understanding your own brain.
Huh.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, it's like a journey of self-discovery.
It is.
I know.
It's like we're not just learning facts anymore. We're learning about learning.
Whoa.
It's like meta learning.
I like that.
And that's, I think, the real beauty of, like, diving deep into something like FSRS.
It makes you think about all this stuff.
It makes you question your assumptions, your habits.
And realize that there's always more to learn.
Always.
Not just about the world.
But about yourself.
Oh, wow.
Your own mind.
Okay, so FSRS Helper.
Yeah, let's talk about that again.
It tries to make FSRS more...
user-friendly.
User-friendly, right?
Yeah, it gives you those learning steps.
Yeah, based on your...
Anki stats.
Anki stats, right?
But, as we said before...
it doesn't always line up perfectly.
It doesn't always get it right.
And that's because of the whole short-term memory thing?
Yeah, FSRS Helper, it just doesn't have that same depth of understanding.
Okay.
You know, FSRS itself, it's always evolving, incorporating the latest research.
We're keeping up with the science.
Keep up with the science.
Yeah.
FSRS Helper, it's more like it's got a set recipe.
Okay.
It's following the rules.
Right.
But it doesn't really understand why those rules are there.
So it can adapt as well.
Exactly.
Huh. Okay.
It's like, you know, FSRS is a master chef.
Okay.
Who's constantly experimenting with new flavors and techniques.
Right.
And FSRS Helper is like a good cook.
Oh, I like that.
Who can follow a recipe.
Yeah.
But they don't really, like, get the nuances.
They don't understand the why.
Yeah, they don't have that deep understanding.
Okay.
So they can both produce good results.
Oh, no. Yeah.
But the chef, they can create something truly extraordinary.
Because they know more.
They know more.
I like that analogy.
It's a good one.
It really captures,
the
like...
essence
of
the difference between these two tools.
It shows that, like, we're still figuring this out.
Yeah, we're still learning.
This whole short-term memory thing.
There's so much we don't know about how it impacts long-term learning.
It's like a big mystery.
It's a fascinating mystery.
Yeah, it is.
And that's what makes this whole field so exciting.
Oh, I know.
We're constantly pushing the boundaries.
Of what we know.
Of what we know about our own minds.
Right, so it's like we're exploring ourselves.
Exactly.
And this whole thing about intuition.
Yeah, it's been on my mind too.
Like, we rely on it so much.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's wrong.
Sometimes it leads us astray.
And with FSRS,
It's like it's challenging our intuition,
yeah.
making us rethink things.
So how do we find that balance?
Between trusting our gut
Yeah.
and listening to the data.
Right.
It's a tough question.
It is a tough question.
And it's one that we need to keep asking
Yeah.
as we move forward with all these new learning technologies and approaches
And that's something we're going to delve into
in the final part.
of our deep dive.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of FSRS.
Yeah. Time to put a bow on it.
So right before the break, we were really getting into this question of intuition versus the algorithms.
Yeah.
Like, how do we balance those two things?
Yeah, it's tricky.
Because our gut feelings, sometimes they're not right.
Yeah, we're not always the best judges.
And FSRS is kind of showing us that.
It's like challenging our assumptions.
So I guess the big question is, do we all need to become memory experts?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I mean, it's helpful to understand how our brains work.
Yeah, but it's a lot to ask.
Right.
To expect everyone to be a scientist.
Yeah, but even a basic understanding can be empowering.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's like becoming more aware of your own learning process.
Like what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. What doesn't work.
Recognizing your strengths, your weaknesses.
Okay, so it's more about self-awareness.
Yeah, and that's where these algorithms can help.
Like FSRS.
Like FSRS.
Okay.
They can give us a different perspective.
But we shouldn't just blindly follow them, right?
No, definitely not.
Okay, good.
It's more about using them as a guide.
Okay.
Like a starting point.
Like a suggestion.
Yeah, and then you experiment. You adjust your settings. You see what feels right.
So it's a back and forth.
Yeah.
It's a collaboration.
Between the
It's
algorithm,
your learner.
the human.
The human.
I like that.
We're not replacing our brains with these things.
Yeah.
We're just giving them a boost.
Enhancing them.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. It's not just about rote memorization anymore.
No, it's about leveling up your learning game.
Becoming a better learner.
Yeah. And being able to dive deeper into things that you're passionate about.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm.
Which is what the deep dive is all about.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this episode, I kind of want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about algorithms and memory and the science of learning.
Yeah, all that technical stuff.
But there's this one crucial ingredient that we can't forget.
What's that?
Curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
That's what drives it all.
Curiosity is the fuel.
Yeah, it's what makes us want to learn in the first place.
And without it, all the algorithms in the world won't matter.
So true.
So, to all our listeners out there, keep asking questions.
Keep exploring.
And keep that curiosity burning bright.
Awesome. That's a wrap on our deep dive into FSRS. Thanks for joining us.